Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Apologies for the length of time it's taken to do another video, and it's actually, for once, not because of Tottenham Hotspur. That's because, I think I mentioned it in the last video, I had a bit of a blocked ear. Well, over the last week, that has slightly developed into a double ear infection, which isn't the greatest thing in the world, because it essentially means I can't hear very much, including my own voice. So I'm on antibiotics at the moment, and that's not doing a lot, but I think it will gradually do something. So the apology not only is about the fact that it's taken a while to do another video, but the fact that I have absolutely no idea how loud or quiet my voice is. So I'm massively sorry if you're constantly having to touch the volume control on your phone or whatever you're watching this on or listening to it, because my family tell me at sometimes I'm very loud and at other times I'm speaking really quietly. But in my head, all I can hear is my voice, like a big muffled droning noise, which may be what you guys hear anyway. So anyway, me aside, and my ridiculous ears, and ridiculous other features, Tottenham Hotspur. You know, when you're not feeling particularly great, Tottenham Hotspur don't help. Especially this week, especially this month. Perhaps some would say the last 2 years or so. But, I mean, I was looking at everything that's gone on this week. It's been an absolute nightmare to report on. Absolute nightmare. We can report on stuff with utter certainty, and within 24 hours, it's made to look like utter rubbish. Not because it is rubbish, but because Tottenham have changed their mind. And that's, you know, certainly has been a frustration with me. I would have loved to have done a video earlier in the week because so many things have changed just in the 7-8 days since I last did a video. Absolute madness, it really is. I mean, and looking at the fans, you know, I know it's frustrating as a reporter. I've been talking about to my fellow journalists and stuff about how difficult it's been to write stuff because Tottenham is just in utter chaos, this management search. They really are. And the fans subsequently have kind of almost been going through like the different stages of grief almost. You know, the stages of grief you've got are there's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. There's all these different things, and you can see fans kind of going through it all. And certainly denial I've noticed as well, and anger. I've been getting a bit of the anger. I think there's certainly been a case of shooting the messenger, which is totally understandable. It's fine. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. But, you know, it's quite funny that, you know, there's been certain... I say funny, you know. I don't know if it's funny, but there's been certain times where there's been talks that I know have happened. You know, I've been in journalism now, I think it's 18 years, I worked out the other day. And if anyone knows anything about the way I write, I've always used this expression, I'll always stick with it. It's not about being first, it's about being right. And for me, I don't write stuff unless I've had multiple sources confirm it. So I wouldn't write that Spurs have been in talks with a head coach or manager, whatever you want to call it, unless they were in talks with that head coach or manager. It's just not the way I work. I wouldn't go off one person's say-so. And preferably, ideally, I go to both sides. So, you know, actually, just in this last week or so, we'll get into it a little bit more, I've been very talking a lot to people within Paulo Fonseca's camp. And it's been fascinating to hear it from the other side as well. And like I say, a lot of the stuff from that, you can easily get verified by talking to people within Tottenham and stuff like that. So it does make me laugh, I guess, slightly when I've got people on Twitter will be telling me, it's rubbish. They never even were in talks with Paulo Fonseca. It's like, yeah, they were. Look, I get it. It's frustrating. And I get it, that denial stage of almost looking at it as if to say, oh, no, because, you know, I think it's because Daniel Levy did that video, didn't he, last weekend? Another brilliantly timed video by myself where I actually said he should do more interviews. And literally within about 2 hours of me doing that, they put out that interview with Daniel Levy. But I think because within that, he said something along the lines of, some of the managers that I've read that have rejected us, we've never even spoken to, which is true. I don't think I've written anything about any managers rejecting them, but I definitely know there's been reports out there, certainly in Italy, places like that, and say manager X, manager Y has rejected Tottenham. And, I don't think that has been the case. I'm sure there have been people that Tottenham have gone to and they've said, "Nah, you're all right, we're fine where we are." And that's a different kind of thing. That's not having proper talks. But yeah, and I think because Levy said that, I think now people have some people have they're so sick of it. And it is, 62 days now since Mourinho was relieved of his duty. So I get the frustration and I get the anger. Trust me, as someone trying to report on the whole situation, nobody gets that more than me. But then to just say, "Oh, this never happened," it's like, it is. Not even, just don't take my word for it. But if every reporter, and we're talking about, news outlets like the BBC have a similar kind of thing to me. I know certainly Simon Stone, who's the BBC reporter, is very good, and he has a similar thing to me of very much make sure from every angle that something is right before writing it. And yeah, and everyone's been writing about it. So that's not to have a grumble. This isn't to me saying like, "Oh, poor woe is me," because, you know what I'm like. If people want to have a moan, they can have a moan. If they do it in a slightly unpleasant or aggressive way, you just get muted or blocked, and I crack on, because life's too short, isn't it? It really is. But ultimately, that wasn't really what I was talking about. I was talking about Tottenham Hotspur. I'm aware we're 6 minutes in, and we haven't even really got into the utter carnage of the last week or so. So let's start with Paulo Fonseca. He's the chap that kind of kicked it all off, and last week we were very much, he was going to happen. And like I say, having spoken to people within Paulo Fonseca's camp, they were all ready for it to happen as well. It was so advanced. And I mean, when I say advanced, I'm not talking about they'd had a few chats. Fonseca had been in Italy, in Milan and Como, speaking to Fabio Paratici, having chats about real intense discussions about the team, about how his backroom staff was going to look. I think I said before about the fact that some of his long-time collaborators, I think it's Nuno Santos, his 15-year assistant manager, and there's another fitness coach whose name escapes me, have both moved on to new things. So he was going to have to remould and kind of shake up his coaching staff, and Spurs were going to help him with more kind of help in the defensive aspects, which was maybe something that has been looked at as one of his weaknesses. So yeah, all these talks were taking place in Italy. They all, from Fonseca's point of view, went well to a certain point. And then he flew off to the Ukraine with his wife, Katerina, who is Ukrainian. She's a TV presenter. They went off to the Ukraine. Contract was there, ready. It had all been agreed by both sides, ready to sign. Visas were being sorted out for them to come over to UK before the end of this month. It was all kind of there. And then Thursday morning, boom. Someone essentially put in a Gattuso-sized grenade into everything, and it all went absolutely wrong for Fonseca. What I would say, what I was told by people, close to Fonseca, was that he did notice within the talks in Italy that he felt that when he'd spoken to Daniel Levy very much wanted a coach like him, with the attacking, entertaining, open way of playing, which fitted the brief and also what Levy had asked for or had said in his final day message to the fans. But he felt that Fabio Paratici wanted something different, wanted a more conservative approach, and tactically wanted someone that was more focused on a defence first, but also wanted the team to attack and score goals, but someone that very much of the foundations were built on the defence. And he kind of felt that was what he felt. But he still thought, okay, that's just two slightly differing views within Tottenham, but this deal's going to happen. But what I heard from the other side, from the Tottenham side of things, from people within the club, was that Fonseca, when he was talking about the team and his ideas for the team, didn't particularly impress them in those meetings this week. And that was what led to a few doubts. And then on Thursday morning, very similar to the Conte situation at Inter Milan, although in very different ways, Gattuso suddenly left Fiorentina. And from what I'm told, Gattuso was someone that Paratici really liked, wanted him for the Juventus job if he couldn't get Allegri for this coming season. He was someone that he liked the way he sets his teams up, but obviously he was unavailable. And then suddenly, I think Fonseca was someone that he'd appreciated and he felt it kind of fit the profile that Levy wanted, but ultimately it was kind of like a compromise a name for him. So as soon as Gattuso became available and those talks with Fonseca weren't going so well, bang, the whole thing fell apart. Spurs pulled the plug on Fonseca. And I do feel sorry for him to a point, as much as you can, for, obviously very well paid managers and all of that. As I said, his wife Caterina, even on her Instagram page, not that I was stalking, but I obviously were keeping an eye because it was good to know where they were and exactly where the talks were being held, where they were flying to, all this sort of stuff. That does sound like stalking, doesn't it? But she'd said about how it was time to end their holiday. I think they were in Sardinia. Because a new page was about to arrive for them and she was very excited. She had butterflies, and it's clearly she was talking about Tottenham Hotspur and moving to the UK. And for all of that to suddenly fall apart when you think the contract's about to be signed, it's tough. And it's I don't want to say it's the Tottenham way, but we've seen the way Spurs have operated in the past, and they certainly, what's the best way of putting it? They have no qualms about suddenly doing what they want. Whether that, makes things difficult for other people. We've seen it with Martin Jol in the past, going behind his back to meet with and appoint Juan de Ramos. And even this summer, we've seen it with Fabio Paratici brought in. And from what I'm told, Steve Hitchen having no kind of knowledge that someone was being brought in above him. And it's someone who, I'm told, he has a very good relationship as well. It's kind of, he's a friend. So, yeah, the way Spurs operate sometimes, it's not particularly pleasant, but then I guess business and especially football is like that. So, Fonseca down, Gennaro Gattuso comes into the frame, which I think when I was told that, did a little bit of digging into that as well, and it was absolutely baffling. Well, not baffling from Paratici's side of things, like I say, he was someone that he liked, but baffling from a sense of this guy is just like such a volatile character. I mean, let's explain exactly what happened. He left Fiorentina after, I think it was 23 days. He was at Napoli the last couple of seasons, went to Fiorentina this summer and left within 23 days. The Italian media claim it's because his agent, Jorge Mendes, wanted essentially his players as targets and suggested targets. And the Fiorentina owner or chairman was like, no, we don't want to go for them. And that causes friction. And Gattuso essentially quit within only, just 3 weeks. And when you look at his track record essentially is quitting or getting sacked every 18 months or so. I think there was one job, was it Sion? I can't remember who it was for. I think he resigned 2 or 3 times. So yeah, this is a guy who is not anything. Spurs are looking for a long-term project manager. It's not what this guy is. His track record as well. Did he warrant being in contention for the Tottenham job? As I said, I'm not going to go too much into Fonseca stuff because I spoke about that a lot last week. But, this is a guy who had won league titles. Whether you believe the Ukrainian league is strong enough to warrant compliments or whatever, that's kind of up to you guys. But obviously he'd had a lot of experience. Whereas Gattuso, his probably claim to fame is winning the Coppa Italia with Napoli. Other than that, a bit kind of hit and miss in the league. They missed out on Champions League qualification last season on the last day of the season. I think he was sacked. I think he was. So even on track record alone, it's a little bit like, and I think the fans were hugely underwhelmed just on that alone. And obviously a lot of them will know him as the man who, had that confrontation with Joe Jordan back in the day when Spurs played Milan. But then even aside from that, there's some very dodgy comments he's made, which, I've seen people sticking up for him and saying, they were a long time ago, he meant this, he didn't mean that. But, if there are comments out there from you on, same-sex marriage, women working in football, there were some race issues ones as well. Pretty much, if you're Tottenham Hotspur and if you've lurched from one absolute PR disaster to the next, it's not the guy for you. It's not. And to be fair to the Tottenham fans, they absolutely united. Spurs have wanted the fans to unite for a long time, and they managed it in utterly not the way they wanted them to, or at the time. And I went off because I just was like, oh my God. I was at the end of a working day and the Fonseca stuff had fallen apart. And I was just like, exactly as I said at the start of this, it's so difficult to report with any certainty on Tottenham right now, because you can talk about and write about something that is absolutely there. And like I say, speaking to Fonseca's camp, and they were like, yeah, it's going to be done. We're going to sign that deal really soon now. And these visas are being sorted out for flying to the UK. And then hours later, it's all done. It's all completely off the table. And so for me, I just got to the end of that day and I was just like, no, I've had enough. I play football on Thursday nights anyway. So I was like, I'm off to football, stick the phone away, just enjoy having a kick around myself. And I came out and it was just like, I saw the reaction to the Gattuso news. And it was just like, Spurs themselves must have been like, what? No to Gattuso trended. It got to number 2 in the UK trends on Twitter. I can't remember was it number 1, but I was shocked it actually never got to number 1. But that just shows you that would have meant thousands of people were using that hashtag. I know the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust got a lot of people complaining about it, and they passed on those sentiments to the club. They're quite balanced when it comes to that sort of thing. They feel it's not their place to comment on every single transfer managerial thing the club do, but when there's so many fans telling them, look, this is wrong, then they will communicate that to the club, and they did. And then, we got to, I wouldn't say the talks were advanced in the nature they were with Fonseca. I think it was more preliminary discussions, having a little chat, probably more with Mendes. Paratici has got a good relationship with Mendes, I'm told. So those were the main chats that happened. Then we'll wake up on a Friday morning and another one has pulled the plug. I think it's fair to say we're probably all of us quite happy that was the case. Like I said, I was underwhelmed by Fonseca, but the more and more I researched him and looked at what he does, the way he plays, his football, and what he's done for players, I kind of saw the logic in that it fitted the profile of Tottenham Hotspur and everything that Levy said in his final day message. When I looked at Gattuso, none of it fitted. He didn't fit Levy's final home game message also said about we lost sight of the traditions and values of this football club. And it's a bit like, yeah, Gattuso, really? Is that fitting the values of this football club? So I'd be surprised if there were many people devastated at the news that the deal they dropped their interest anyway, let's put it that way, in Gattuso. But obviously what it does mean, it's yet another manager that hasn't gone any further. And, we're at a stage now where Spurs start their pre-season on July the 5th. That's the day that non-international players will come back in, they'll do their fitness tests and blood work and all the sciencey stuff they have to do. That is, that's 2 weeks, essentially. 2 weeks and a day. Or you could be watching this tomorrow and it'll be 2 weeks exactly. That is no time. That kind of essentially means that Tottenham really need to now move very quickly and select someone who is ready to work straight away. Because not only have you got to get them over and into the UK, but they've got to plan this pre-season. Otherwise you're left with the alternative of calling up Ryan Mason and Chris Powell and saying, look, sorry lads, I know we kind of used you for a little bit and told you, that's it, thanks for that lads, we're going to head on now and crack on with a real manager or whatever. But it kind of left in a situation where you said, you're going to have to ring them up and say, guys, any chance you could come back and just do a little bit of pre-season training for us because we've messed this up. So they've got to, in my opinion, this is not saying this is what it will be, but in my opinion, it pretty much keeps you to out-of-work managers. That's kind of what I heard is more likely. That obviously leaves you certain ones. I know some people are now thinking, and quite frankly, Tottenham could do the Ryan Mason angle and look at international managers, but for me, I think we're at the stage now where you just need to get someone in and they need to get cracking. They need to get their ideas across in pre-season. And it's going to be very interesting to see what Paratici does, because this is a real test for him. Which sounds mad when you're talking about a guy that's worked for 11 years at Juventus, one of the elite clubs in football. And having watched he did obviously a Zoom interview with the club after I did my video last week, which I thought came across very well, very enthusiastic, very energised, and he sounded really excited about it. Not sure how he will be a week on, but no, it was a really good interview. I thought he came across as a guy who knows kind of what he was doing. But what I would say, it's a big test for him, because in terms of the managerial side of things, you look at Juventus, and Juventus, other than 10 months under Didier Deschamps, who was a former Juventus player, they've only appointed Italian managers for pretty much almost the last 50 years. So it's not like they've had to look across the world and see who the best manager is. They've pretty much they have, barring Deschamps, always looked inside Italy, picked a manager, brought them in. Now, Paratici's had to come into Tottenham, and in an ideal world would be looking at everyone out there. My fear, and thus far it's kind of being realised, is that he's only looking at Serie A managers or people with links to Mendes, who he's, like I say, has got a good relationship with. That's obviously quite concerning in the fact that I'd say Serie A is very different to the Premier League. It's a very demanding league, the Premier League, not only on players but on managers as well. It's a crazy league. The amount of fixtures and the amount it takes out of players, and the amount of kind of squad changing you have to do during the season. And there certainly have been managers who have worked in Serie A that have come to the Premier League and have succeeded and have been superb. There's some fantastic ones. Conte obviously being one, Ancelotti. There's a fair few out there. But if that is only the pool of managers you're looking at, then you really are kind of limiting yourself. And it may just be a coincidence. It may be that, he's come in and Spurs are already looking at Conte because, he'd left Inter Milan. And as, people at the club told me, you don't pass up the opportunity to have a chat about Spurs with one of the best managers in the world to see if they want the job. But, to then go from Conte to Fonseca, who'd worked in Serie A, and then Gattuso, who's not only Serie A, but is a Mendes client, it's a little bit, it's not showing a huge appreciation of the global game, which I think would be unfair to say of Paratici, because from what I can see from his transfers, he very much has a wide scope and looks around the globe and brings in players from Germany, France, South America, everything. But I don't understand. Well, I do understand. Essentially what I'm saying is Juventus haven't had to really look abroad much, and maybe that's kind of his mentality when it comes to managers. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next. Like I say, he's a guy with a lot of experience. His critics in Italy suggest that he was very good as a kind of like a head scout figure, working with Beppe Marotta. But when Marotta left, it was all a bit messy. In 2018, that I think it was the signing of Ronaldo when it all kind of went a bit wrong, and then Marotta left, and Paratici took over this all-encompassing role as more like the kind of, I think, chief operating officer of football or something like that. Some people in Italy suggest that, I don't know if this is the case, but this is what they say, and reporters over there, that actually when he was doing the bigger role, maybe Juventus weren't quite as successful in terms of, bringing in the right players and managers and things like that. Obviously, Pirlo came in the last season and they didn't do particularly well by their own high standards. So, I think this is a massive first test for him. Officially, he doesn't start till July the 1st. But like we say, he's already been out there in Italy having meetings with Fonseca and trying to sort out Gattuso. And so we'll see what happens next. I'm told, I know the reaction to this, what it's going to be like. I'm told from not only people in Italy, but also people over here, that Paratici, one other manager he does like that hasn't been in Serie A, is Nuno Espirito Santo, obviously the former Wolves manager. I can already hear a lot of people probably going, oh, like that. The obvious first thing to look at is another Mendes client, again. We saw what happened at Wolves with the many Mendes players, many Mendes players who were brought in there. Santo, what I would say about him, and I'm not definitely saying they will go for it. I know some reports, since I think I wrote this the other day, I said this about Nuno Espirito Santo, and some reports since have said that he is someone that they're looking at. I've been told by kind of various people not to rule him out, is the best way of putting it. And like I said, I've been told by a lot of people that he is someone that Paratici likes. Does he fit the brief that Daniel Levy put out there for, open, I want to get the exact words, free-flowing, attacking and entertaining football? No, he doesn't. How to describe? Wolves are a tough one. They keep the ball nicely. They can play some nice football in keeping the ball. Are they free-flowing, attacking? I'd say no. People I know that have covered Wolves say it's not the most entertaining football to watch repetitively. It's very much based on, how to put it? I think the best way to say, it's not the most entertaining of football. It's not going to probably get you out of your seat. At times it will look nice. Some of the passing will be nice. Ultimately, a lot of their stuff goes through one or two players. But mainly, it's based on keeping the ball. And I suppose he plays with the back three, doesn't he? And wing backs as well. Last season was I don't want to say disaster for a team that obviously only came up 3 years ago. But compared to the previous seasons where they became an effective force in climbing the table, last year was very disappointing. I think they were 13th. Conceded a fair few goals as well. This is the thing. People point to, obviously, Raul Jimenez being out, and obviously that's a big blow to them. But they've still got quite a few attacking, talented players in there, but it just didn't work for them. They weren't very good at all. So I think that would be another one that would be quite underwhelming for people. I think there will be a few people that mainly will think of Wolves a couple of years back and think, no, that would be good. But I think when you really delve a little bit deeper into the way Wolves play, it's not what Tottenham are looking for. And I don't think it mixes or meshes with Levy's final day message at all. Personally, as I always say, I think it'd be interesting. Is it going to be the football I'd love to see week in, week out? Probably not. I don't think it would be hugely departed from the Mourinho football. I'm not saying they're similar, but I'm not saying it's a massive leap away from it either. Preferably for me, probably not Espirito Santo. But as a guy who's available, ready to start any job now, I know Everton have had talks with him as well. And I know I've got a fair few Everton supporting mates who very much don't want him at Everton. I think after the names mentioned, again, it would be an underwhelming appointment. Who else is out there right now? I mean, one name that's come up a few times, obviously, is Ernesto Valverde, the former Barcelona manager. He's an interesting one. Completely different in terms of the football. I think the football would be very nice. He's a very good manager. Interestingly, I don't think Pochettino, from everything I kind of remember, was a big fan of his. He was his boss at Espanyol. If you wanted to play devil's advocate at a time when Poch was maybe a bit older and Valverde didn't want this kind of dominant voice in the dressing room, so he was kind of edged towards not only the end of his time at Espanyol, but at the end of his career, really. And I know he wasn't a big fan of Valverde. I think they patched up their differences during a pre-season in America. I think Spurs played Barcelona in LA. I was there. I think it was at the Rose Bowl. And they had apparently a bit of a chat before or after that game and kind of thrashed out a few of their differences. But I know he wasn't a massive fan of Valverde. And what maybe surprises me is that when he left Barcelona, I think they were top of the league. I think they just got walloped in the Super Cup. But what I find strange is that he hasn't taken on any other jobs in the past 18 months, which I find a strange one. For a guy who clearly has got quality as a manager, but no one's really gone near in the last 18 months, which is an odd one. I know. I read a really good piece by the journalist Sid Lowe on. He's kind of into photography now. Valverde did an exhibition, I think it was, which was it was a really interesting piece actually. But yeah, Valverde, like I said, I haven't heard anything concrete on him at this stage, but I think he'd be a good choice. Whether he can adapt to the Premier League is another thing. But I know he'd be a popular appointment. I think a lot of fans would see that he's a former Barcelona manager. I think he certainly won one double with them, maybe two. He did well with them. I know people say it's Barcelona, but you look at what's happened since he left. I don't think they've won the league since he left. So he clearly was doing something right that others weren't. I'd like Valverde for a million miles over Espirito Santo for me, but obviously you could argue Espirito Santo has that Premier League experience. Another one I saw again linked was Ralph Rangnick. Rangnick? You know me and my pronunciations. I found it a strange link when it was months back. I find it an even weirder link now that Paratici's come in, because essentially you've brought in a director of football type. I don't see you then going to bring in another guy in his mid-60s who has spent recent years as a director of football. So you've got a director of football under a director of football. My kind of things with Rangnick before, it's like Ragnarok, talking about Thor Ragnarok. My thing with him before has always been very much, he hasn't really worked outside Germany, and he's in his mid-60s, and you kind of wonder why. And obviously, he's also got some iffy comments in the past he's made, which I'm not going to go into now. I don't see that one working. I don't see the relationship or the idea there for me. So there's him. Who else has there been? I mean, Erik ten Hag, the name I think is going to knock around for a while. What I know about Ten Hag was that he was interested in Tottenham, and Tottenham certainly liked what he's done with Ajax. He fits the profile to a glove. I've made no bones about it in recent weeks. I've said, for me, I think he absolutely ticks every box that Tottenham are looking for. Some people could say yes, but he's another one who has only won a league in his country, but that's all. What are you going to do? That's his job. If he's done his job, fair play. And I just think he ticks the boxes in developing young players, playing with a bit of a swagger and working what he's got very well. Ajax don't spend big money on players. They don't. They develop. And for Tottenham, that would be very eye-catching. But what I would say is, from what I understand, is very much Spurs spoke to him early on in the process. And then when they started to chase Pochettino and then Conte, they very much left that interest behind. And obviously, he had that. Some people say it was an option taken up by the club to extend his contract by a year. Some say the club just offered him a new deal, which he accepted. What I would say is either way, it's just one more year on top of his contract. Would Tottenham go back for him now? It remains to be seen. Ultimately, it'll be Paratici's choice because this is the crucial thing. As I've said before, Paratici has to pick the person. We'll probably have gripes or whatever with whoever that person may be, but ultimately for the system to work, the director of football has to pick his head coach to work underneath him. Otherwise, you've got a relationship that's an awkward one right from the start. So, yeah, it has to be someone he wants to pick. I've seen some talk. I know, it's no secret Spurs wanted Mauricio Pochettino, and Poch wanted to come back. I know he did. I've spoken to various people that know Poch, and I know he wanted to come back. However, the kind of guy he was never going to stamp his feet. He was never going to make a massive deal. And I think it's quite interesting that he just has kind of remained tight-lipped. And I know that's annoyed a lot of PSG fans. I think what will happen, I've said this before, once the Spurs job is kind of settled and someone is in place, Poch will then probably come out at some point for the sake of the PSG fans and say, no, never wanted to go anywhere, which is probably the right thing to do, because otherwise the PSG fans are going to continue into the season thinking, this guy wanted to leave, didn't he? And he's, why has he not said anything? And also, that means you get less patience. You get less time to do what you want to do. And the Pochettino way needs time. He's going to need a real pre-season with PSG to get them up and running. I think they'll absolutely sweep Ligue 1 this year. And I think a lot of that will become because of his pre-season. But yeah, sorry, off track. People are saying that they might, still go for Poch. My issue with that is, from what I understand, is he's not keen on the director of football structure. He didn't really want to work in it at Tottenham. It was a bit different when he had Paul Mitchell. It didn't really work with Baldini. A bit different with Paul Mitchell because he was a guy that he knew very, very well, was close friends with. With Hitchin, I understand it was a similar thing as well, in that they were friends. But coming in with someone that's not and going into this rigid director of football structure, I'm told that's not for Poch. And certainly, from all the noises coming out of France, that seems to be what's happening with Leonardo at PSG as well. So I'd be surprised, and ultimately I just don't think PSG want to let him go. The other key thing with Pochettino, and the same applies with Ten Hag and any manager employment now, is it's so close to pre-season. Spurs might have mucked things up. Spurs might be, desperately trying to get someone in now before pre-season starts. But any other club is going to think, no, we don't want to have that issue. We don't want to be trying to replace someone a week before all the players come back or less. And I can totally understand that, which is why it puts a lot of doubt on people like Ten Hag and Pochettino. Unless, such a fuss is kicked up, it almost becomes an untenable situation. But yeah, no, I'd be surprised at that one. Klinsmann I've seen linked. Klinsmann, I want to be nice because he's such a legend of Tottenham Hotspur. As a fan, as a kid of Spurs, I had one of my shirts had Klinsmann on the back, and he was brilliant. And both spells when he came back and essentially helped save Spurs from relegation under Christian Gross. So utter legend, and comes across as such a lovely guy as well. But as a club manager, no. His club management career is brief and utterly horrendous. He was at Bayern for, I think it was about 9 or 10 months. And, you have to read the Philip Lahm autobiography, which I haven't, to be fair. I've seen the serialisation that came out. I think Bild brought it out in the serialised version, and it obviously went across various media outlets. He essentially said, to paraphrase, it was all just fitness-based, and the players didn't have any idea what they were doing tactically, and they actually would have to meet up, the players themselves, the night before the game to discuss what they were going to do in the match. And he came back into club management. It's completely gone out of my head where he was at. It was a Bundesliga side about, was it two years ago, something like that? And it lasted a matter of weeks. It was an utter disaster, and it just didn't happen. So, he did good things with Germany, I think, in terms of the motivational side of things. I think he's good at that. But ultimately, that's not enough. And it's not enough in the modern game at all. And I think that's why his club management career has been, So, brilliant guy. And I thought it was very telling in the BBC thing that they did. Gary Lineker was talking to him. And Klinsmann, having said he'd spoken to Levy in recent interviews in the last couple of weeks, pretty much, he admitted, I rang Daniel Levy and I haven't heard back since. And I kind of think that says everything. Which is not to do Dan Klinsmann, because he was an utter legend, as a player. There were a few better strikers out there, World Cup winner, brilliant player. But as a club manager, I'm sorry, no. That's not what you're looking for Tottenham right now. And I get the appointing a club legend, someone that made you feel great about the club as a player, but have a little bit of a dig, have a little bit of a read into how he was as a club manager. And he shouldn't be taking charge of a Premier League side, in my opinion. And I think that's why he's had so little kind of club work. Obviously, he was the national manager, wasn't he, of the US as well. But as a club manager, I think you can see why he hasn't really done much club work myself. Who else? Some people have said, why aren't the club going back for Graham Potter? It's funny now, isn't it? I think we're kind of at the stage where Spurs have kind of reached the low. And they've underwhelmed the fans so much that some of the coaches early on in the process, that the fans were a bit like, oh, really? They're probably now thinking, oh, I'd even take him over him. And it's a weird kind of perception thing, isn't it? So Potter, who I like, I think he's a good manager. I think he's His Brighton team play in a very, very attractive way. They just lack a real goal scorer to put the chances away. I know Tottenham were admirers of his. I know players liked his football after Brighton played Spurs a couple of times. I was speaking to some of their agents, and I know that the players very much would have been quite happy. That's not to say all players, but just certain players. But from all it sounds like, that hasn't really been followed up on. And again, he's a guy with a very long contract. He's very happy at Brighton from what I can see. And again, it's down to Paratici. Does Paratici really know the ins and outs of Graham Potter? Is he able to kind of say, yeah, that's the guy I like, kind of thing? Because, again, it has to be someone that he wants. International managers. We've had... Obviously, Roberto Martinez is certainly someone they like. I would love the idea of Roberto Mancini. I think he'd be superb. And I think other people have said that as well. However, the issue with him is only a month ago, he signed a huge new long-term deal until, I think it's 2026. I think it's like a 5-year deal. That was a month ago. So any hopes of getting him away from Italy, I can't see, unless there's some exit clause in there we're not aware of. I'd be utterly shocked if anyone gets him away from that job. Some people have said Joachim Low from Germany. Again, is another one who, I'm not going to say we're talking about Klinsmann kind of time here, but he's a guy that really hasn't had much of a club management career. It's a bit of a leap. Club management and international management are so different. There's very few people I think can straddle both very well. Gareth Southgate, obviously his name's come up as well. I think certainly watching the way England have started in the Euros, I think you can see why maybe that's a no. And certainly in club management, obviously, again, you look at what he's done, and it's. I think sometimes we look at international managers and they get this real level of esteem without really remembering how they were as club managers. And that's not to do them a disservice as international managers, because they can do very, very good things. But we kind of forget how different working with players day to day and having 2-3 matches a week for, 38, 40 weeks of a year is compared to just having them for a little bit amount of time when it's very much purely working on a few certain things. Like I said earlier, international manager, I'd be surprised at this point purely because they just need someone to get in there and work now. And unless they went down the Ryan Mason route, I'd be surprised. But hey, who can rule anything out with Tottenham at the moment? I think what kind of annoys me about it all is that in this process early on, there was a clear profile and an idea of who they wanted. I said it a million times before. They were looking for a progressive, attack-minded, possession-based coach who could develop young players and who could work with the state-of-the-art techniques that Poch had brought in on the sports science side of things. That's a very clear brief. And, and the clear candidates early on were there. Some of them were unattainable, but you could see the idea. Julian Nagelsmann, someone that a lot of people in the club wanted when Poch left, but they went for Mourinho, the glamour appointment. Hansi Flick was another one I know they really liked from his Bayern times, but the problem with him, it was just so advanced with the Germany job, they were never really going to prize him away from that. And obviously, the man who fits the brief himself, Mauricio Pochettino, who, I had my own reservations about whether it's too soon for him to come back, but had it happened and he clearly wanted to come back, it would have been a very decent marriage of what everyone wanted at the time. Brendan Rodgers, another manager they really liked and fits the brief to a T, but quite frankly, probably why would you leave Leicester right now? You look at the platform they've had this season, the FA Cup win, the young players they're bringing in as well. It's a very exciting time at Leicester, and I completely understand why no one would really have their head turned there. But what I mean is you can see those managers. You can absolutely understand what they were trying to do, and I think people have kind of appreciated that. From what I was told at the time, that was from the list of head coaches and managers that Steve Hitchen was asked to draw up by Daniel Levy, and that was what happened. Then Paratici happened. Obviously came in over Hitchen's head, and everything changed. They started to look at different things. Obviously, Conte, I don't want to put that on Paratici because I think that's unfair. I think that was certainly a case of a very, very good manager becoming available suddenly, and you switch your eye. Like I said before, the meme of the guy walking with his girlfriend and turning around looking at a woman, that was Levy with Conte. Completely and utterly different direction to all of the managers I've said about that were on that list. Very much a short-term manager, very much someone that wants and demands a lot in terms of resources, restructuring, reshaping of a squad. And Spurs, had some promising early talks, was going well, and then they realised, I think, just how much he required, and it all fell apart. Some people will claim it was Conte rejected them. Some people will say it was Tottenham. From my point of view, from what I've been told, again, I can only go what I've been told, Spurs just realised they couldn't meet his demands, and it all fell apart quite quickly at that point. But then since then, it's kind of felt really scattergun. Fonseca very much probably is more so in that attacking brief, but certainly I know wasn't someone who was top of their candidates before, but it was someone that Paratici suggested. Then Gattuso, very much not part of that brief. Espirito Santo, very much not part of that brief. And when you're flip-flopping like this, and I can totally understand that fans are probably thinking, yeah, but are they really flip-flopping? Or are you just reporting that? The one I get a lot is, you're just throwing names out there. And it's like, I'm not just throwing names out there. I'm giving you the names that I've been told that I know that have had talks with, have inquired about, and that's that. And like I said, you could very clearly see a defined type of manager. And in the last couple of weeks, that type of manager has been thrown out, and now we're at whoever Paratici wants, which, like I say, is what has to happen. But whether that impacts, and I mean, we're already seeing it. If I'm telling you that Fonseca's camp are telling me that they noticed a clear difference in what Levy wants and what Paratici wants, Levy wanting an attacking, entertaining manager, Paratici wanting someone who's more conservative in their tactical approach, and I've been told that that is the case by people within Tottenham. So there already you have this little, I'm not going to say conflict, because it's no way is it conflict at this time, but just a slight differing view. And that already creates this kind of difficulty in getting the right man, because ultimately then it has to be a compromise. It has to be someone who fits both. It has to be someone who fulfills Paratici's need for someone who is responsible at the back, tactically conservative, but also somehow at the same time fits not only Levy's but the fans' demands for football that they're going to enjoy again. And that's going to be such a tough task for Paratici. And I'm sure he's already finding that. He was probably thinking, Gattuso's the man I want. Let's go for him. He's available now. And then he's probably seen all the fans absolutely go mad about it and thought, oh, what am I doing here? I'm sure he's not questioning his joining Tottenham, but it certainly is a really interesting situation and frustrating as hell. It really, really is. I'm really intrigued to know whether Daniel Levy now regrets that end of season last home game message and being very precise in the type of head coach that Tottenham would appoint, because it really puts them into this corner that they kind of have to do what he says. Otherwise, he looks a little bit of a mug. It kind of does. It looks like a guy with all the power has dictated what he wants and what the fans can expect. And then he's brought in a guy who he has to give the power to as part of this relationship. Paratici, I said before, was going to be given a bigger role, taking on a lot of responsibilities that Levy would have. And with it comes that power. But then can Levy give the full power to this new man if it ends up making him look like a bit of a plonker? It's a fascinating scenario. It really is. So away briefly from the manager stuff. Hopeful that we'll hear about Sonny's new deal soon. Like I said before, from what I was told, that was something that was pretty much agreed kind of The outline agreement was done, but they couldn't announce it during the Bank of England loan, the COVID finance facility that they took out, 175 million. As part of that, it wasn't allowed to go to player acquisitions, which, from what I've told, kind of include bonuses, and which also brings in contracts into it. So if you notice, I think they only announced during that year that they had it out, or 18 months, is it a year? Only Eric Dyer and Tanganga, I think, were announced as new deals, and from what I've told, they were previously agreed. So Sonny hopefully will be done now, and that's because Spurs took out this, I think I've mentioned this before, £250 million raised through Bank of America, which they've now paid off the Bank of England loan. So that's paid off. And what they've done essentially, if you missed me explaining this before, they've taken a short-term loan that had to be paid off by March 2022, and they've put it into this much longer term loan, which I think is 20, 30 years. It's got to be paid off over. And so essentially that 250 has gone into paying off the 175, and it's also, I believe, gone to paying off another shorter term loan from Bank of America as well. So while it doesn't bring loads of cash for Tottenham suddenly, what it does is hopefully puts them slightly nearer to where they were pre-pandemic in terms of not being financially stuffed. And now, once the stadium revenue starts to come back in, they can start building and getting bigger again. Still got to sort out those stadium naming rights. If they do that, then suddenly, wow, they actually have money to spend. It'd be interesting to see whether it gives them a little bit more room to play with. And like I said before, transfers coming in will hopefully help that as well. And that's very much something Paratici needs to work on. But you've also got the element of, while the head coach won't have as much say as a manager does, he will want to have some say on who goes and who stays and who he'd like to work with. From what I'm told, Fonseca's talks this week did centre around various players and what he wanted to do with, how he wanted certain ones to play and stuff. So that probably don't want to have any major departures or arrivals until you have that new man, the new head coach in place. But yeah, hopefully we'll get the Sonny deal soon, which will be fantastic. And I think that will give everyone a lift during, what's been utter chaos from Spurs recently. Elsewhere, just a very brief look at the Euros for just like a minute or two. Harry Kane, I'm somewhere in the middle when it comes to Harry Kane and the whole kind of criticism right now. I'd agree that I don't think he looks at his freshest or fittest. I don't think this is the Harry Kane of 2 years ago under Pochettino with the aggressive pressing. He was so lean. He was so ridiculously fit. What I'd say now is this season he's had an incredible season, but probably hasn't had to be as such a peak physical fitness because under Mourinho, Spurs weren't really pressing as much, and he didn't have to do that. So I do wonder also, obviously, with the ankle issues he had a couple of months ago, he's definitely not the freshest, fittest Kane I've ever seen. He's not doing picking up the ball and driving inside and curling shots in. But what I would say to balance that up, the service has been utterly non-existent to him. He's barely getting the ball. And there's some talented players in there around him, but I look at them buzzing around him, and the ball isn't being crossed into him. I think there was one decent cross from James, wasn't it? Which he just couldn't really get on target. But other than that, I could barely count the number of times Sterling passed the ball to him. You could argue, yes, that could be his movement wasn't particularly great, but as the lone striker, you've kind of often got to be up there as much as you can. I've seen people saying about him coming ridiculously deep to get the ball, but he kind of wasn't. I didn't think he was. At Tottenham, we've seen him do that, and he then has Son bombing on, or Lucas or Bale or whoever. But I don't think that's really has happened with England. This isn't the Kane of Tottenham that we're seeing with England. And I think people are probably being a little bit harsh on him. I think it's Kane. He just needs the service around him to be that little bit better, and he will score goals. He will. But yeah, not a good time for Harry Kane. I've always said the timing of everything that came out around him was bad. I know it angered a lot of people within the club. I don't think it did Ryan Mason any favours. I don't think it did Tottenham any favours. And obviously, however much he'll say it won't distract him, it's always hanging over his head. It's always going to be asked to him by journalists in the press conferences. And I think the whole shebang altogether just does him no favours at all. But I hope he comes good because he's absolutely class, Harry Kane. He really is. He is one of the best out there. And very quickly elsewhere, I think Joe Rodon's had a good tournament. I literally had the Wales game on in the background, but I wanted to turn it off while I did this because I want to be able to concentrate and not be distracted going like this the whole time. I think he's had a good tournament. I think Gareth Bale obviously has done very well, whether you consider him a Tottenham player anymore or not. Technically, I don't think his loan deal has ended. I think it ends at the end of this month. From what I'm told, people in the club expect him to head back to Madrid for his final year of his contract. I think Ancelotti probably helps that cause, which is a shame. I wrote an article the other day saying I'd quite like him to come back and play as a number 10 for Tottenham. I think he'd be really good in that central role, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So I'm not going to go on too much about that. Obviously, since I did the last video, Christian Eriksen, honestly, I'm not someone that is affected too much by stuff. I'm quite a laid-back guy, as you probably can tell. I watched that footage, watched it live happening with Christian Eriksen, and I felt utterly sick. I really did. He's a guy who obviously interviewed a fair few times when he was at Spurs, so I've had the pleasure of talking to him. He's a very witty, dry humour, lovely guy. Didn't like speaking to the media at all. He would often go through the mix zone with the old phone into his ear, and you just knew it could ring at any point because he wasn't on the phone. But when you did get to talk to him, he was lovely, really clever guy, very honest and very interesting to talk to. And it was just horrible. It was utterly horrible. And I thought the way the Danish team stood around him, for me, is one of the enduring images, other than the horrific images that we were shown. And you can go into the logistics of whether we should have seen it or not. But I think for me, I'll take the enduring image of the Danish players crying their eyes out, knowing what was happening behind him as he was being resuscitated, but still standing in front and just giving him his kind of modesty, and the decency of it was just incredible. And obviously, comforting his wife and Simon, I don't know how you pronounce it, so I'm sorry, Kier, I don't know. I don't want to do it disservice by keep on trying to pronounce it, but the Danish captain was incredible. He was the first one to him, put him in the recovery position, was over comforting his wife with Kasper Schmeichel as well. But just thank God he's okay, as well as he can be, in this situation. Medics were fantastic. I thought, as Anthony Taylor, I think it was the referee, was superb in very quickly recognising something was very wrong. And that's why I think we're where we are now, and he's out of hospital. And it'd be interesting to see what happens next for him because, some might say if he has to give up playing, he's had a very good career. He's now got the silverware as well. He's won league titles in the Netherlands and Italy. And I think he turned 30 next year. Obviously, no one wants to lose their career or anything like that. But what I'm saying is he's not, we've obviously seen terrible examples in the past of young players just having their careers wiped out or even worse. And for Eriksen, he's done a lot already in his career. But I do wonder whether this thing he's had put into him, which is like essentially something that jumpstarts his heart, if it were ever to do that again. I think, and I'm no medical expert, but I think it's similar to what Daley Blind had and has been able to keep on playing. So it'd be very interesting to see. I'm sure he'll desperately want to keep on playing, and why not? Like I say, when I'm saying he's going to be 30, I'm not saying he's at the end of his career because he could have another 5, 6, 7, 8 years in the game. So I think the key for me is that he's alive and he's well, and his family have him. He's got a couple of children. He's a young family, and it was horrible. It was horrible. But just thank goodness he seems to be on the mend and very much still with us, which is terrific. Who else did I want to speak to? Lo Celso. Little word on Lo Celso. He's looked very good for Argentina. I've watched a few bits of him out in the Copa America. He's looked very good. He did come off with a bit of a kind of a limp I think it was against Uruguay the other night. I'm told, I asked a couple of Argentinian journalists who cover the national team, kind of what exactly was going on. They kind of indicated to me that it's believed to be like a previous thing that he had. It's just something that every so often he feels. So it'd be interesting to see, obviously, whether that's something that becomes a little bit more serious again. Hopefully not, and it was just something that he's now aware of, and if he ever feels it, he very quickly says, no, I need to come off. And obviously he'll have a period of rest once this tournament's done. But yeah, he's been doing very well. A lot of praise coming his way in Argentina for his performances in the midfield and the way he's been linking up with Messi ahead of him as well. So, a lot of people, I think, that have been kind of writing him off. It'd be very interesting to see how he comes back. Him and Ndombele. Ndombele is going to be coming back with a point to prove. Being left out of the France team. Very interesting interview I saw yesterday with Gareth Bale that Sky Sports did. Tanguy Ndombele, he says, is the player who surprised him the most in his career. He said, watching him in training, the things that he is capable of, he said it reminded him of Ronaldinho. He said he's honestly one of the most gifted players he's ever seen. And if he can ally that with the rest of his game, and I think he was starting to do that. He's got his critics, but I think he was starting to do that last year. It's such a jump from the French league to the English league, and I think he will need more and more time. And I think hopefully a pre-season under a new head coach, or almost went air quote there, but hopefully a full pre-season under someone that I think he'll come back quite big, because I think he'll want to make a real point to Didier Deschamps as well. But yeah, if you get Lo Celso having a good Copa America, coming back, hopefully this injury isn't something that develops, because that clearly has been a problem for him. Those two guys could be big for the next head coach. I know they're not everyone's fans of them, but I like them both. I do. So that's pretty much there. I've kind of hit the hour mark, so I won't keep you much longer. Manager-wise, we'll have to see what happens. Again, it's very frustrating. It really is. I could do this video, and within a couple of hours, we could have an absolutely new candidates come out of nowhere that Paratici has suddenly unearthed through maybe a Mendes link or some other link. And everything I've said in this video could mean nothing. This is, I can't remember now. It's been so long, this hour. I can't remember if I said this at the start, but it has. We've been talking amongst us as reporters, and just literally 24 hours later, we could have written something that is absolutely based in fact. And 24 hours later, it no longer is the case. And it gets us utter flack. And I understand it, because from the outside, it does look like everyone's making up as they go along. But unfortunately, the only ones that really feel like they're doing that is Tottenham Hotspur. It's been an utter mess. I'll be intrigued to see now whether they stick with Paratici's list, whether they go back to Hitchin's original list, but obviously it has to have the blessing of Paratici on whoever they pick. But Tottenham needs someone soon. I'm all for getting the right man. I'm all for taking that bit of time, and they have 62 days. But, we've seen in the past, this is not the longest time Tottenham have taken. It was the season when Hoddle went. When Hoddle went after about 6 games into the season, they took their time. David Pleat came in for the rest of the season, and at the end of that season, they went for an international manager, and that was Jacques Santini, the Frenchman. It was a disaster. But out of it came Martin Jol as his assistant, who became, the first building block of the Tottenham of a kind of a new era. So if I'm going to pin my hopes on anything, it's that often when Spurs muck things up, they inadvertently stumble on the right path. So that's what I'm hoping, that after all the messing around, chasing dreams in the last 60 days or so, that they actually inadvertently stumble on the right path. So let's see what the next few days bring. Who knows, the next few hours. I could be having to do another video. As I said at the start, I hope you can hear me properly. I hope I haven't been shouting. I hope I haven't gone really quiet. I don't know. I can just hear this muffled voice in my head of my own. And yeah, hopefully I'll get better. Hopefully the antibiotics work. Hopefully you all stay safe and healthy yourselves. Look after yourselves. And I shall catch you later. Goodbye.